We've waited 2 hours and 6 minutes to focus solely on the Packers. We go to Green Bay. We call in Rob Demovsky of ESPN. He's been covering the Packers for the last 17 seasons. And he knows a lot of good emotion there, also knows some painful losses. Let's compare what happened yesterday, Rob, to the 2007 NFC title game loss. And how does this compare?
It's a good comparison, Paul, because that was as gut-wrenching a loss because they had the NFC Championship game at home that year. They go to overtime, and Brett Favre throws that interception, and the air just goes right out of Lambeau Field. This a little different, though, on the road, and it was a slow burn. That's why I think this one was a little bit more agonizing because it slowly eroded away from the fake field goal that they got burned on to obviously the onside kick that they didn't get, to then getting overtime and then not even getting a chance to have the ball. This one probably hurt because it just took longer for it to end.
Who are Packers fans most disappointed with today?
You know, it's funny. I just got off the plane, a red-eye from Seattle, but just reading Twitter, you could take your pick, whether it's Mike McCarthy for getting too conservative in that third quarter, even to Mike McCarthy getting too conservative early in the game and kicking those field goals when they're down at the goal line.
Do you think that's a fair criticism? Does that fit?
Well, I'll tell you what. I said I'm a believer of in the first half you take the points, so I can't criticize them for kicking the field goals. But if you want to criticize what they did, you can criticize the play calling when they had first and goal, second and goal. That I'm okay with. But in the second half, I think they had 6 plays over 2 series where they had a lead of 19-7, and they ran 5 times and threw once. I think you got to get the ball in your quarterback's hands a little bit more during those times. And then people are obviously mad at Brandon Bostic for the onside kick, which he wasn't even supposed to field. He was supposed to block, and Jordy Nelson's supposed to get it. They're mad at Morgan Burnett for picking off that pass and then sliding rather than trying to return it, which could have gotten them probably in the field goal position with about 5 minutes to go to add to the lead. So you could take your pick.
Well, Rob, if the Packers find a way to win that game, now tell me which plays or situations in the game that you would critique the most.
As far as like what they did wrong or what?
Correct. So if they win the game, would we be critiquing that they were too conservative in the beginning? Would we be critiquing Morgan Burnett's slide?
Right. It's a great point, Jonathan. I mean, and it's a good. You bring a good point from a player's perspective in that there's hundreds of those plays that we look at them differently based on the outcome of the game.
Right.
I think it's a great point to make. But the bottom line is, they didn't win the game, and that's all that matters in the end because those plays all ended up adding up to it.
Right.
I think had they won the game, we would have said, "Wow, what a way to persevere and get it done in spite of all those problems."
Packers' #1 scoring offense during the regular season, Rob. Up over 30 points per game. They went their last 9 possessions without scoring a touchdown. And again, this is what we either get to do or have to do day after a disappointment like that. More blame to the conservative play calling the way you see it, or Aaron Rodgers not being himself?
Well, he definitely wasn't sharp, Paul. There's no question about it. But I think the Seahawks defense is what makes them that way. And the atmosphere. It's a difficult place to play. I mean, I'm sure, Jonathan, you must have played up there a time or two in your career.
Yeah, 0-3 up there.
Yeah, well, there you go. And you probably were on some pretty good teams, too. It is a hard place to play. I thought, given, all those variables, I actually thought they played okay. Rodgers didn't play his best. The shame of it is, Paul, the shame of it is that they finally got a pretty good defensive performance other than probably the last couple of possessions. And that's what has really been their undoing in the playoffs the last couple of years when they've been upset or lost games that maybe they shouldn't have. And this time their defense finally came through with a pretty good performance, and you have to look at Rodgers and the offense that didn't quite capitalize enough.
When the season ends in disappointment, whether that season is 3-13 or it ends this close to making it to the Super Bowl, coaches and GMs think about change. Yep. What change needs to be considered in Green Bay?
Well, a couple of things. They've had special teams problems for a couple of years. They had 7 picks blocked this year. 7 in one season. That's just unheard of. It was field goals, extra points, and punts. They need to correct that. You can't lose playoff games because your special teams let you down.
So you think there's a special teams coaching change?
That's very possible. Sean Slocum, who actually I think is a pretty good coach, but they've had some problems with it over the years. It's not just a one-time thing. It could be personnel, too. They're going to have to take a look at getting themselves more playmakers. Ted Thompson, the general manager, has got to find some more weapons for Aaron Rodgers.
You talking about running backs, receivers?
I'm talking about receivers. Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb took so much of the load this year. Devontae Adams at times was okay. Richard Rodgers, tight end, was at times okay. But they need to find some other weapons. When they were so great in 2011, I think, Jonathan, you probably played against them in 10 and 11, somewhere back then. They had so many weapons offensively. Donald Driver, James Jones, Jermichael Finley, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson.
I remember we played them first game of the season.
First game of the year,
in Green Bay, and we lost that game. But why isn't Seattle saying the same thing about their offense? Because I would argue that Green Bay has more talent offensively at the skill positions and at quarterback than the Seattle Seahawks, but somehow Seattle found a way to win. Yeah,
their defense is, I think, so good. I don't think the Packers are ever – you can't put everything into both sides of the ball. You sort of have to pick what you want to be, and I think Seattle's identity is they run the ball and they play defense. The Packers' identity is that they pass the ball because they've got a great quarterback, so you got to give your quarterback as many weapons as possible.
So would you rather see, and we're getting a little bit ahead here, but would you rather see their very first pick used on a weapon to make Aaron Rodgers better or used to make that defense better?
I think you just load up on offense. I think that's when they're at their best. They've got enough good players on defense to be okay, and they won the Super Bowl in 2010 with a defense that was just okay. They won it because their quarterback was unbelievable.
And I think, as a defender, would you be wanting more help, or would you say, you know what, give that guy another playmaker?
Yeah, well, I hear what Rob is saying, and it does make sense, but then I wonder about a Julius Peppers. Does he have another year in him, another productive year in him? Then I'm looking at some of the cornerbacks. Trent Williams, he's always been hot and cold. You look at Sam Shields, he does play well. So I want to agree with you, Rob, but I just don't know if letting another year go by defensively without adding again to that defensive side is the right move.
Well, Jonathan, the Peppers addition was pretty good, and I think they're pretty happy with it. They got their money's worth there.
Yes.
He had 3.5 sacks in the playoffs. He did go through a little stretch late in the year where you could say, well, he looked like a 34-year-old guy, but he turned it on in the playoffs. And I think he did enough to bring him back. If they can find another guy, you're not going to find another Julius Peppers, but if they can find another sort of mid-level guy at the end of their career, they did it with Charles Woodson, who was at the end of his career.
And he was extremely productive for them.
Yeah, and those guys bring veteran leadership that you cannot discount. That on a team like this, they're not far away. There's just a piece or two that needs to be added, and that can be a real boost to a team like this that's right on the edge.
So, Rob, you are inside the Packers facility right now, correct?
I am.
You're on the way.
I am in the facility, and they're about to clean out their lockers and have their last media access right now.
Are you going to get time with Aaron Rodgers?
No, Rodgers doesn't typically talk today. He does his radio show tomorrow, and that'll probably be the last we hear from him for a while.
Are you going to call in?
That would be fun. That would be fun.
It would be. All right. Rob Demovsky, 17 seasons covering the Packers. Thanks for your time, Rob.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Rob.